In this CBT nugget, we're going to talk about Active Directory rights management services. Now, this is still part of your planning of your transport security, but I didn't want to put this in the last video because this isn't built into Exchange. It's not part of Exchange. Exchange integrates into Adrms. Now, this is a separate product. However, it's one that you already own because it's a role that you can install on a server. And we want to talk about why you might want to use this and how to integrate Exchange into this. Okay, so the agenda for this video. Now, I'd like to do as much of this as I can as a demonstration. Wouldn't that be cool, right? Get to work with a computer rather than just spending a lot of time drawing pictures. But we do need to stop off and do some definitions. First of all, why you might want to use Adrms and even what this thing is. I mean, what's it there for? Where did it come from? It's a pretty big product, actually. And some of the planning around Adrms. Now, I'm going to just be real specific with you right now. What we're doing is we're talking about planning as far as working with Exchange. As you're going to see, Adrms is part of a much larger scheme of things referred to as, and you may have heard it referred to as IRM, which is the wow, my my brain just fell apart. The information rights management. Information rights management, Adrms is one of the underlying technologies that makes information rights management possible. And what we want to do is talk about the Exchange portion of this. This is actually a much larger thing that you're going to see a couple of times throughout this entire course. Also, we want to take a look at, and here's where the fun part gets in, the demonstration part, is configuring Exchange for Adrms. But you know, I'm going to take this one step further by showing you how to do a quick install of Adrms as well, just so that you can, if you want to try this in a lab, you can set this up yourself. And along the way, as we're configuring it, of course, we will test it and to see what it looks like and to see how we might use it. So what do you say we get started with why you're even going to want to use Adrms? First of all, some of the reasons that you might want to use Adrms. And Adrms, like I said, is a separate product. So this is going to be a little bit strange at first as we start to talk about this. But first of all, let's just talk about why you might even want to consider it. And really it boils down to this, is that the built-in features of Exchange are pretty cool for transport layer security. So you've got things like TLS and you know, which is really your SSL stuff. The problem with this is that while it secures the communications between two hosts, and so we'll just put whatever our transport layer security is going to be, you know, we'll set up certificates, and I'm just going to write the word certificates, and you know, this line of communication right here, and I usually do it in green, I don't know why I did it in blue, but this line of communications is going to be encrypted over SSL for us. That's our transport layer security. Now this is cool. This is great. Exchange lets us do this. What this doesn't let us do, though, is kind of control an individual email message. In other words, I get all of the emails. I can do with them whatever I want. I can save them, forward them, print them, all of that kind of stuff that I can do with the emails. But wouldn't it be cool to be able to control that on an individual email basis? Wouldn't it be kind of cool to say, hey, if this came from the managers group, this one email, you're not allowed to forward that email. Well, you can't do that with TLS. So we need something that's a little bit more granular. And, you know, we can do things like, some of the other things that we could do is like email encryption. So you can do email encryption. You know, usually this is, you know, an additional product, an additional setup. And what it does is it requires that the user, you know, knows to use it and actually applies it. Well, I don't know if I always want to rely on the user in this. So when you want more granular control over mail messages, when you want to be able to have more control over who can see what, when they can see it, ooh, when they can see it, and where they can see it, where they can see it. You want to get more into the information rights management side, and Adrms is one of the products that's used for this. Now, with Exchange, this is going to give us some additional features. Such as I already started mentioning, like whether you can read the email, copy the email, print, save, or forward the email. We can put up conditions when that's going to expire, whether it's going to be, whether we're going to have encryption and it gets, encrypted, and who's allowed to unencrypt it. These are good things with Exchange. However, I do want to point out, and I want you to keep this in mind as we go through this, that ADRMS, not that I can actually say it, can't spell it either, is a pretty big product, and it's a product used with a lot of other products. Our portion of this is just the Exchange integration, but this could be used with SharePoint. Actually, it works with any enabled applications that know how to work with ADRMS, and it's a pretty big entity. Well, you know what? I tell you what, with this why ADRMS, why don't we do a little bit of what the components are and planning for it, start to bring this together and make a little bit more sense out of what this is, and then we'll set it up. So let's talk about the planning and some of the components of ADRMS. Now I kind of want to minimize the pictures because I think seeing it will help make it, well, it's a big product. It'll make more sense by seeing it. However, I also want to point out, it's kind of like saying, oh, you want to use SharePoint? That's a piece of cake. Just install it real quick and you're good to go. Well, SharePoint's a huge product, and ADRMS isn't quite that huge, but it is definitely a big product. So we're going to take a focused kind of look at what this is. First of all, let me just kind of start off real simple with ADRMS is simply a role. Yep, it's a role. Active Directory Rights Management Services is a role that you can install on a server that's a part of your domain. Now, something that I'm going to point out that I already have in my environment that you're going to want is that this is going to work with a couple of components. One of them is going to be certificates. And so somewhere you probably want to have some sort of PKI infrastructure already going. I already have CS, the certificate services, going that you'll see me actually grab a certificate from when I install ADRMS in here. But it's a role, and once you install the role, then you can start to configure it. However, the focus is, for what we're going to do, is focus on the Exchange side. So once this role is installed, we're going to go to Exchange, and we're going to configure Exchange to integrate into this. Now, by integrating, here's what we get. We're going to be able to start to use some of the features that ADRMS can provide our Exchange clients. Now, what kind of clients can we support with this? Well, it's probably more than what you think. An ADRMS client really kind of starts with Windows Vista, the OS, and up from there, and Server 2008, and up from there. So those clients are capable of working with ADRMS. As far as Exchange goes, well, Outlook 2003 and above, your mobile devices. So we got Outlook, we've got your mobile devices that are supporting ActiveSync, and I think it's version 4.1. So mobile devices that are using ActiveSync, and Outlook web app, so OWA, can all use this from the Exchange side as Exchange clients. So you have everything that you need ready to go for this. It's just setting it up and integrating it. And integrating it will be us executing a series of commandlets, really, to set this up and creating some special groups for this. Now, it's going to seem a little bit strange, and this is one of the things I want to point out with planning ADRMS. There's a couple of phrases that we want to get used to, and that's trusted entities. Trusted entities are trusted entities, I think I'm close with that, are the users or groups or computers and applications that are permitted to have access and work with ADRMS and access to what specific kind of information. So that's how we can control it. Now we have what's called the usage rights and conditions, and I already mentioned this, but your usage rights are really, what is it you're allowed to do with something? In the case of Exchange, are we going to be able to forward this email is a great example. Matter of fact, that's the example I'm going to demonstrate when we set this up. So you have these usage rights, and then you have conditions such as when those rights would expire. You can already see that this is start to get a little bit complicated, but I'm going to show you that from the Exchange side, getting it integrated and starting it, it's not too bad. However, I do want to point this out. oh, this is one of the tricky parts. Do you remember during the virtualization stuff that you and I were talking about, part of the pros and cons of virtualization, one of the cons is that you might need some experts in the virtualization platform of your choice. Experts. This is one of those same times. This is not something that you're just going to wing out in a few minutes and it's going to be set up and it's going to work perfectly. This is a complicated security model that you're going to want an expert on ADRMS. Now, if you're that person, great. If you're not that person, you need to find one. Usually they're part of your PKI or security group, and if there is no one, well, then that kind of leaves it to you. Again, we're going to focus on this integration piece, but there's more that's going to be involved that you can do with this. One of the things that we are concerned about is the creation of templates, and templates make it easy for us, and I'm just going to write this down here, templates, make it easier for us to use this with Exchange. And I'm going to show you an example. Exchange comes with a default template when you set up the integration. It doesn't exist until you set up the integration, but once you set it up, you'll get this default do not forward template, and that's the one that we're going to apply. And we apply it through the use of transport rules. Yeah, transport rules is one way to apply it. And we'll set up a transport rule. See how this kind of ties into your transport layer security? It is part of that same kind of process. The question is, oh boy, do you want to implement this? And I have to be honest with you, I am a fan of this technology. I'm a fan of this technology simply because it gives granular control. Also, it pays to start learning this now because there's other integration points that we're going to work with this throughout the rest of this course. So I want you to kind of think of this as, this isn't a complete ADRMS video. This is kind of the start to what we're going to use a couple of different times throughout here with a couple of different concepts as we're working with Exchange in different ways to integrate Exchange, like Exchange Online. So, oh, I threw that word out, didn't I? That Exchange Online word. Yeah, I sure did. Well, I'll tell you what. Why don't we, I think it'll make a little bit more sense if we dive in and start to do it for real. So why don't we dive in and start to install it, and then we'll set up the integration with Exchange. So let me start off with a scenario of why I want to use ADRMS, and then we'll go through the setup of it, and you can get a glimpse of how this is going to be working for us. So let's pretend for a second that I want to take like a managers group, or I think in my case I'm going to use like a group of users from research and development, and when they send somebody an email, because that email may contain confidential information, I don't want them to be able to forward it. I could even set up a transport rule that says if it has confidential in the subject line, don't forward it. And I can do all kinds of things with it with ADRMS. However, let's just kind of focus on this do not forward concept. So usually you'll already have ADRMS set up by the experts that have it configured for probably other stuff, like SharePoint uses it quite a bit. And you could just do the integration. Before we get to the integration though, let me show you an installation of ADRMS. To start the installation of ADRMS, I'm going to do this graphically. So I'm going to launch Server Manager rather than doing it through PowerShell. I think it'll make a little bit more sense, and I'll maximize the screen here. I'm going to go over to Manage, and I just want to point out that I'm in a lab environment, so I'm doing this on a domain controller. Don't yell at me because this is a domain controller. Normally you wouldn't do it there. And I also want to point out that I already do have a PKI infrastructure, Active Directory Certificate Services, because I'm going to need a certificate for this, and you don't want to use self-signed. I'll show you here in a little bit. So I'm going to go to Add Roles and Features, and I'll maximize this screen. Click Next. This is the server I want to do it to. And in your Roles and Features, I don't know if you've noticed this, but here's Active Directory Rights Management Services. When I click on this, it's going to need to install some additional components. Now, of course, it's going to want to install the remote server administration tools for ADRMS. That way we can manage it. But I also want you to notice that it's going to be installing IIS because that's how you communicate with it. There's actually a couple of web services that are going to be produced through, by default, the default website on your web server. So it's going to install a web server, and actually what you're not seeing in this list, which you'll see in just a few minutes, we're going to need SQL as well. But don't panic. we could use the internal SQL that Windows already has. So let me go ahead and say add features and say next. Now this is just simply, I'm going to say next here on features and say next. Let me just point this out. This is the first ADRMS that I'm setting up. So you have to create what's called a root cluster for all the certification and licensing. You can add additional ADRMS servers later on to this to get some high availability. And right now, we're just going to do Active Directory Rights Management Server. Oh, don't you worry. Later in this course, you'll be hearing about Identity Federation support. So yeah, you better. Anyways, here we go. So I'm just going to have it installed. This is just a role install. This isn't really configuring anything. So what's going to happen is that when he's done installing the role, we're going to have to do a little bit more on the configuration side. Now you can see that he finished the installation of the role, but I'm going to hit close, and I want you to see that we get the little warning up here, notification thing, that we still have some post-deployment tasks to do. So I'm going to go ahead and maximize this screen. We've got some ADRMS stuff to do, so let's go ahead and hit next. I'm going to create a new ADRMS root cluster. If you already had one, you could join an additional server to it, but this is brand new. And I need to specify, because see, we're going to store all this into a database, so I need to specify a SQL box and a database that I want to put this into. Or you can use the Windows internal database, which is what I'm going to do, which is fine for a lab environment. Of course, I strongly suggest that you try this out in a lab environment before you go into production, because this will have an impact. However, in real life, you do want a SQL server up for this and make sure that it's being maintained and backed up. It's not just hung out there to dry. So there's important stuff in here, just like any other kind of portion to your PKI and your security. So I'm going to say next. Now he needs a service account. He wants just a regular standard user account. So I'm going to give him one. I have one called, I think it's called, let's find out here. I think it's just called student, oddly enough. I think I created one when I made these VMs. It's just a generic user. It's not like an admin or anything. Yep, there we go. Let's see, next. And now the crypto, we're going to go crypto mode 2. This is the best that you can do. This is one of those times you need to talk to one of your experts, because you can't change this later if this doesn't work out for you. Crypto mode 1 is an older crypto. And if you need crypto mode 1, don't pick mode 2. So this is one of those times that, again, you have to either be the expert or talk to the expert. You can get more information about it. Oops, and I actually clicked on it, and it's going to go out to it, about the different crypto modes here to explain them to you. But since I'm in the latest and greatest environment with the best clients, I can use the best security. And by the way, that was kind of the point. Since I'm in the latest and greatest with the newest clients and servers, I can use the best security. That's why we don't like old stuff anymore. Anyways, get off my high horse on that one before we get too much into security. ADS, I'm going to let it centrally manage its key storage. If you don't, then you have to kind of deploy the keys going forward when servers need to use it. I want to make this a little bit more automatic. So, and now it's going to need a password for it. So I'm going to put in a password. Dun, 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 dun. And now it wants to know what website it can create virtual directories off of for ADRMS. And I'm going to let it use the default website. Now you could create a separate website for this, but in this case it's just my ADRMS box, so it's not necessarily a bad answer. Now if you are doing this internally only, or if you're doing this in a lab environment, you can use unencrypted HTTP. Now I want to point out that you'll see an error message, not an error, a warning message that popped up that you can't use this for Identity Federation support. And you know, I didn't really define this because we're going to define it later. This is when Identity Federation support is when you want to have trusted access between two different organizations. Well, we certainly don't want to do that over non-secured HTTP, and that's what it's telling you here. However, in a lab environment, or if you were just using this just for internal clients only, you could do HTTP, but I'm going to use the more preferred HTTPS. Now, I need to put in the fully qualified name of this box and get a certificate for it. He happens to be DC. I told you not to yell at me about the domain controller. Let me get the FQDN incorrect. Here's the port that he's going to use, 443. We'll hit next. Now, like I said, I already have a certificate that I issued through ADCS. So here's my certificate for that FQDN, DC Company PRI. So I'm going to use that certificate. Now, I want to point out that if you were to do this and do a self-signed certificate, when you go to do the Exchange integration, as a matter of fact, I'll show you exactly when it's going to happen, you're going to get a nasty red error message that says, I'm sorry, I can't work with this. So don't do self-signed. Okay, don't do self-signed, but I'll show you when that error would happen. So I'll use a certificate. We'll hit next. The name of the licensing server, so that's DC, and I'll register his server connection point and install. And this will complete an active the ADRMS installation. Again, I want to point out this was a very basic, very simple install, and I used some of the best settings for it. But your environment may need to vary. So keep that in mind as you start to plan and look at this. Now, once his installation is complete, which really he's creating he's creating the websites, he's setting up the web services for this, then ADRMS is pretty much ready to be played with. However, we're going to do it from the Exchange side because we need to integrate Exchange into it. And I'll even show you an example here in a second that you can tell that it's not integrated a couple of different ways, in fact. So he'll finish up installing here, and then we will take a look at the management screens. Now the install just completed, and I want to show you that you can go to Tools and you'll have a new management. There we go, Active Directory Rights Management Services. And I'm going to bring this up, and I want to just highlight a couple of things just for you to see them quickly, and then as we integrate Exchange, you'll see how some things change here. So I'm going to kind of show you a starting point. Now, whoops, he flipped screens on me. I'm going to maximize this, and I want to show you over here to the right that here's my particular ADRMS server cluster, the DC one, and I can open up his navigation. And this is where that you would configure all of your policies and templates and all of this good stuff that you're going to need for certain products, different products, all of the stuff that you'll need for ADRMS. Now, a couple of things that I want to point out to you is I want to go to the distributed rights policy information. There are no policies right now. And I also want to show you, where did he go? Security. I want you to see something here. Under security policies, I want you to see this thing called super users. Members of the super users group are granted a license so that when they request it from ADRMS. Now here's the thing. If we want to use this with Exchange and we want our users to be able to use this, they're going to have to be able to request a license from ADRMS for this. So we're going to need to set up some super user capability with Exchange so that Exchange can ask for this. That's one of the things that you'll see me do as we start to integrate with Exchange. So we're going to have to set up some super users, and then we're going to have to set up the integration points for Exchange. It actually sounds more complicated than it is, but well, I'll tell you what, let's go to the Exchange side and let me show you what we can do for the integration. So first of all, from the Exchange side, let me get you familiar with some of the things that we're going to work with. So let me open up the management shell, and I'll clean up the screen a little bit here so that it's a little bit easier to see, and bring it up here. First of all, remember what we started this video with is that ADRMS is a technology that is supporting, is an underlying technology that is supporting the information rights management capabilities that we can use with Windows. So when you're looking for commandlets, and you'll need commandlets for this, what you're looking for are IRM commandlets. So let me give you an example. Let me do get help *IRM. And first of all, I want to find a get, oh, there we go. So you got a get IRM configuration that'll show you how the system is currently configured. You've got a set IRM configuration that'll allow us to set up our integration points, and then a test IRM configuration. And I want to show you a couple of uses of that to show you, well, if you're not quite done, that it fails. So, and how you can kind of gauge what you're doing. First of all, really quick, let's do get IRM configuration. And here's what I want to do is I want to turn on the internal licensing for this. Now to do the internal licensing, that's where I'm going to have to set up my super user group. I've got to create one, and I'm going to put something weird in here. It's going to be kind of strange. I got to make my super user group and turn this on, and then give some permissions to the website files for my Exchange servers. It's kind of a strange, tricky process, but I'm actually going to take you through it step by step so that if you were trying this out, you could do this as well. As a matter of fact, I want you to try this. So let's start off though with turning on the internal licensing. Now just to let you know, you do see here that you can do external licensing. This is if you have access to ADRMS from the outside, and so that's an external issue. Think that's kind of challenging in the sense that your Active Directory users have access to ADRMS from the outside, but it is possibly an important piece in your setup, so you might want to take a look at that. Now, for the internal licensing, to set this, well, the internal licensing, you probably guess it's already at false. I want to set it to true. So I'm going to clear the screen, and I'm going to say set IRM configuration internal licensing enabled $true. Now, he's going to have to go and talk to the ADRMS server. He's getting this information from Active Directory. When he goes and talks to that ADRMS server, when I hit the enter key, if it's a self-signed certificate, you're going to get this error message, big red error message that basically tells you I can't deal with the self-signed cert. So this is where you want HTTP, or like I did, you really want to have a real cert for this. So he will turn this on, our internal licensing. And now that our internal licensing is enabled, what I'm going to need to do now is I need to set up this super user that I can turn on in ADRMS so that the Exchange server can allow us to use these features. Now the super user, I also need to make it a member of a I need to have a member that's a very special mailbox. So this is kind of tricky. Let's go ahead and do a new distribution group. And I'm going to call it, what do you want to call it for our ADRMS super users? Well, I tell you what, we could just call it ADRMS super user. There's an idea. I guess I could not capitalize that S. ADRMS super user. Okay, that sounds good. Now, I need to add a member to this group, and this is a very special member that I'm going to add. So watch, and this is going to be kind of tricky for me to type in, so let's see if I can do this. Add distribution group member, and to the ADRMS super user group, and the member is going to be, this is what Exchange 2013 comes with, a built-in super secret mailbox that you can't normally see. You can't see it. This is why we're not using the graphical. You can't normally see this, called the federated email box. However, it has a very special, oh man, this drives me nuts. Boy, it'd be nice if it was just federated email. Did I spell that? I got to check, make sure I spelled that right. If I spell this wrong, it ain't never going to work. If it was that simple, boy, that'd be great. But it's not. It's federated email dot. Ooh, now a good looking thing. This is a very specific number, and I'm just going to tell you right now, you're never going to memorize this, so just bang it. Bang it. Just bang federated email, and you can find it. And let me give you kind of a, see if I can type it in here. I always have to write this down. 4C, it's a 1, not an L if you're looking at it online. F for D8 Bravo. Sorry to have to make you go through this with me, but this is what you have to do. 8179, and it's 4148, and then 93. I'm about to show you where I always screw this up. BF-00A 95, and I have to tell you, this is where I always make a mistake because I'm looking at it online, and it looks like it's FALE. I make it a word like fail or something like that. It is not an L. It is FA1E. If you do this wrong, it's going to fail. You just have to then go, oh, wait a minute, did I type it in correctly? And look really close. 042. Now, if I've got this correct, yippee! I've got that member now added to my super user distribution group. Now let's go enable that as one of the super user groups in ADRMS. So I'm going to flip back over to ADRMS. This is where I'd left the management screen open before, so let's go back down to super users. Super users. It says right up here that it's currently disabled. So over here on the right, we can enable super users. Now, just because you enabled it doesn't mean there's anything there yet. It's not set. So I need to change the super user group. And what we're going to do is we're going to use that group that we just created. So what do we call it? ADRMS. So let me just say check names on that. And, there it is. Super user. Say OK. OK. Okay, now Exchange it can request the use of these licenses, and so to be able to de-encrypt content, to be able to use all these ADRMS features that we want to use. So we've got the super user created. So we set up the internal licensing. We got our super user set up. Now we have to do a couple of other little things. If I want like OWA to support using ADRMS, I need to turn on the client access server. This is all done with the set IRM configuration. I also need to do, if I want to do some transport decryption and stuff, being able to decrypt email messages and how I want that handled. So I still have some additional settings to set. So let's go back to the Exchange server and back to our set IRM configuration commandlet and try those out. Okay, so we're back on my Exchange box, and let me show you a couple of common configurations to do. So right now, if I do a get IRM configuration, notice I've got him set up, he's true. Now, what I want to look at in this case is I want to set up OWA, so I need to do a client access server enable. It's as true to get him enabled. Oh, it already says he is true. Oh, he already got set up. Okay, so I don't have to do that. But here's, if he's not set to true, here's what you would normally do. You can probably guess IRM configuration, client access, server enabled, $true. Now notice that it says that no settings were actually changed or modified. That's because he was already set to true. So that'll get OWA up and running for us. Now, one of the other things is your transport decryption setting. Now, there are a couple of different options you have for this. So I always forget what they are. And the IntelliSense, I don't believe I just said that. The tab completion doesn't help you remember in this case. So here's what I like to do is I like to do a good old-fashioned get help on set IRM configuration. And I'll do a full. We can just do a detail. That'd be enough. For that. And you can look at some of the examples that are in here, but let me just, because there is actually an example of what I'm going to do, setting it to mandatory, but let me show you the options. So if you go look at the parameters here, here's the transport decryption setting. So you've got disabled, optional, and mandatory, and take a look at what these actually mean. Disabled is the transport decryption is disabled for internal and external messages, which means you don't get it. Mandatory, messages that can't be decrypted are rejected and an NDR gets returned. Or optional, best effort approach to decryption, messages are decrypted if possible but delivered even if decryption fails. Now what I want to do is, for my environment, I want to make this mandatory. If you can't decrypt it, then NDR this bad boy. So what I'm going to do is set IRM configuration to what do I want to set? Oh, the transport decryption setting, and I'm going to set this to mandatory and get him set up. Now I want to point something out. Look at the warning that it's giving me. Transport decryption is set to mandatory. To to avoid the NDR for the IRM messages, make sure the Exchange server is granted super user permissions on the Active Directory rights management server. In other words, that thing that we just did, well, that did my super user. Yeah, that was kind of the whole point to setting up that super user. But I want to point something out. It says you can verify this configuration by running test IRM config. I want you to look at something, because I want to show you something. This is, a lot of people get to this point and they, well, here, let me just show you. Test IRM configuration. And what you do is you put in some identity that you want to test it for. So I'm going to do is administrator at company.pri. And it's just going to see if this user can use this through Exchange. It's going to, oops, what did I do? Administrator. administrator at company was not found. I must have typed something wrong here. Wait a second. Let's see. Administrator at company.pri. How could he not be found? He has to be found. Let's try this again. Let's see. Oh, that's why. Sorry, it's not the identity. I want to see if a sender can send or a recipient can. I want to check a recipient or a sender, and in this case, as a sender, I'll just check him. I could do it as a recipient as well to see whether he could use this administrator at company.pri. And I want you to see that. Look at the result down here. It says fail. As a sender, he fails. And if I did recipient, it'd say he fails. And I'm going to go up, scroll up here, and it says, well, you know, some things worked. Let's see. The Exchange server is running an enterprise. Loading the ARM config. Config loaded. Okay, good. Retrieving the certificate. Verifying the version. Notice, for troubleshooting purposes, I want you to notice it's putting in that URL. Remember, I'm the one that specified this. So one of the things you want to test is to see if that actually works. It says it passed, so it's testing it for me, acquiring a license for it, a rack, and so rights account certificate, I'm getting that. Failure. Oh, I've got a rack failure. Oh, this is a component of ADRMS and how this whole underlying technology works using these rights account certificates. And so it tells you that this failure may be caused because of your decryption level. In other words, I can't get a way to decrypt this. And here's why. You don't have permissions. In other words, we're not actually done yet. He does tell you down here what to do, and a lot of admins fail to read the entire message. This failure may be caused by features such as your decryption, transport protection rules, journal report decryption, Outlook web app. However, it tells you make sure that the Exchange servers group is granted read and execute rights on the server certification.asmx and publish ASMX pipelines in your ADRMS server. Wow, that's a mouthful. Here's what it's saying. We got a file out there that doesn't have enough permissions. In other words, our Exchange servers need permissions to this file that's in that website, and it's trying to use it, and it doesn't have permissions. So I'm going to show you how we can fix that. So I'm back on my ADRMS server. Matter of fact, let me go ahead and minimize the management tools here, and let me show you how we can fix this. We got to go out to that website. So it's under inetpub www-root, because we had to do the default website. Here, I'm going to make the window just a little bit bigger here. Underscore WMCS, and it's certification, and it's this one right here. We need to do two things here. We got to go to the properties and give permissions. So I'm going to go into properties, security, and I got to tell you, a lot of people run into this issue. So I'm going to say edit. And here's there's really just a couple of things I need to add here. I need to add in a group called the Exchange servers. So I'm going to type EXCH and hit check names. And let me just show you. I'm going to move this over. Exchange servers needs read and execute permissions. So I'll say add, say OK, and make sure it has read and execute and read permissions. I'm going to say apply. Because there's something else I need to add in here as well is the ADRMS service group. So let me just do AD and hit check names. And up here you'll see the ADRMS service group. And then we're going to go back and test it again to show you that it'll now work and that our de-encryption will now work. And you need to give it read and execute and read. And I'll say okie dokie. Now the only thing I did was I did exactly what the error message told me, right? I fixed the permissions issue. Let's go ahead and go back over to the CAS box, my CAS box, right down here. And let's run the command again. Now remember, this one failed because it was trying to hit that de-encryption and it wouldn't work. Now let's try it. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. I know you don't need me singing, but come on, it's fun to kind of sing while you're doing this. Yay! Look, it passed. It passed. It passed. That means it all works now. Oh, come on, that's kind of cool. Tell you what, why don't we set up a transport rule and test it? You know, it's funny. Remember I was saying that Exchange has a built-in do not forward template? That template is now available. Now that everything is set up, I want to try that. So I've signed into the ECP, and I just want to show you here groups. I have a group here called the R&D group, and the administrator is a member of that group, and I want to make it so that his stuff can't be forwarded. Yeah, let's do that. Now, also notice there's that super user group that we created before, and if you go in and take a look at its membership list, let's just do that real quick. Membership, you'll see that it has the Microsoft Exchange Federation mailbox associated with it, which we set up using the commandlet. So I'm going to go down here to mail flow, and this is where we were doing transport rules before, and I'm going to create a new transport rule. And as we did earlier in the earlier video, I'm going to hit more options, and let's call this the no forward rule right now. And we're just going to make a simple rule and test it using Adrms, so you can start to see where this will work for us. So if the sender is a member of this group, and let's choose the R&D group, say add. Now I'm going to have to maximize this so I can get to my OK button. And do the following. Now let me just show you. Underneath here, you've got modify the message security. Apply rights protection. So this is where I can start to use different templates. Now, here's an RMS template. This is the one that Exchange has by default. Part of the planning process with ADRMS, with both Exchange and any other product that you're going to use with ADRMS, is to start to decide what kind of templates you want and what you want them to do. In this case, guess what do not forward does? Yeah, it doesn't let them forward. So I'm going to say do not forward. Now the rest of the rule is ready to go. It's set to enforce. So let me just go ahead and hit save. And then, you know what? I'm going to flip to another box and sign in, and we'll try this. We'll try this out. We'll send an email and see what happens. So on this box, I've signed in as administrator, and I'm going to send a new email to Bob. Let's see, new email, and it's to Bob Smith. There's Bob Smith, and the subject's going to be confidential. By the way, you could set up the transport rule to check the subject line or check something in the message body. There's all of that transport beautiful flexibility that we talked about in the last video that you have. Please, Bob, don't forward this. And I'm going to hit send. Now it's sending it through, and as it leaves, I'm going to flip over to another box where Bob is signed in, and we can see, oh, there it goes. So let's go over to here, and let me hit refresh, and we'll see when Bob gets the email, and we'll see if we can forward it. We'll send it to like Andy Smith or something like that here. As soon as it comes in, there I am, Bob Smith. Come on, email. And there it is. Oh, let's click on it. Click on it. Oh, there it is. Oh, look at the markers. Do not forward. They can read it. They can't forward. Oh, see, it already says conversation. Oh, it said, Bob, please don't forward this. Well, you know what? I don't feel like paying any attention to what he says. I'm going to forward this to Andy Smith. I'm going to forward it to Greg Shields, my buddy Greg Shields, since he, did the first. See. Oh man, it turned off the Yay! See, now I have a little bit more granular control over my email. Oh, come on, that was pretty cool. It's a simple demonstration, but it was pretty cool. I can't even forward it. So it worked. It turns out that it worked just as expected. Yes, this was a relatively simple demonstration of using ADRMS, but think about this. We actually did quite a bit throughout here. So like, why to use ADRMS? Well, it's when you want granular control. I don't think I could spell the word granular, but it's when you want control over what happens to individual email messages, which, remember, you don't really get with the other features of like transport layer security. This gives you some more protection that you can apply. Now, your transport rules, your transport security, all those different rules that we did in the last video, they're great, but this adds a little bit more. Being able to encrypt, being able to do what we did, do not forward. Now, planning the use of this, yeah, you can see that ADRMS is a pretty big, and it's going to be a complicated product. It'd be kind of like, setting up ADCS for the first time. There's a lot of moving parts in there, and it works with a lot of things like SharePoint. What our focus was showing you how to, or what my focus was to show you how to basically integrate it with Exchange. At least get Exchange tied into it, some of the common errors and some of the tips and tricks to get around those errors, and then how to set up a simple transport rule with the built-in template so you can verify that it's working. Now, what do you do from here? What's next? Well, now that you have individual mail protection with ADRMS, now's when you want to start looking at the planning for what else do you want it to do. And again, this is going to require that you have an expert with ADRMS and yourself working together to create some templates and decide on what is it that you also want to be able to control with ADRMS. So what I do is I sit back and when I work with a customer, it's how important is it restricting certain emails from both internal and external use on where people can see them and what they can do with them. Like, is it really important whether somebody can save or forward an email? If it is, then ADRMS is something that you have to consider as part of your transport security. It is a challenge, but it's certainly not a challenge that you can't overcome. So I hope this simple demonstration has been really useful. And along those lines, I hope this whole video has been very helpful with you on ADRMS, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.